What if that cozy Airbnb you just booked is more than a unique stay? Could your travel choice be fueling hidden issues, from housing crises to neighborhood transformations? As Airbnb grew, so did its impact, often in ways no one expected. Let's dive in and uncover the hidden story behind every booking. It all began in 2007 when Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were two broke friends trying to make rent in San Francisco. Facing eviction, they came up with an unusual idea. Why not rent out air mattresses in their apartments to people visiting for a design conference? They called their idea Air Bed and Breakfast. At first, the idea of strangers crashing on an air mattress in your living room sounded pretty strange, but it worked. Guests loved the affordable option and the chance to connect with locals. That one weekend sparked the idea that would grow into a global company. But did Brian and Joe ever imagine just how big their little experiment would become? Probably not. As they started to build out their platform, many investors dismissed their idea. Letting strangers stay in your home sounded risky and impractical. People even warned the founders that the business would inevitably end in disaster. But against all odds, they pressed on, even funding their idea by selling novelty cereal when things got tough. With time, they were joined by Nathan Blecharczyk, their tech-savvy and third co-founder, and Airbnb took off. With the help of Y Combinator, a startup accelerator, they grew faster than anyone anticipated. From just a few rooms in San Francisco, Airbnb exploded to list millions of properties in nearly 200 countries. Yet, as Airbnb grew, it became clear that this success was not without some significant costs. At first, Airbnb seemed like a win-win. Travelers got affordable, unique places to stay, and hosts earned extra income renting out spare rooms. But as it grew, did anyone expect how much it would impact housing markets? What started as the occasional rental turned into a full-time business for some, with property owners realizing they could make more through short-term rentals than traditional leases. Many even converted entire properties just for Airbnb. This shift had an immediate effect on housing in popular cities. Take New York, San Francisco, or Paris, for example. In these cities where housing was already in high demand, Airbnb listings began to dominate certain neighborhoods. Long-term rental properties turned into short-term rentals, and rents skyrocketed as housing supply shrank. Can you imagine being a local, looking for a place to live, only to find that your options are disappearing because so many units are dedicated to Airbnb? The numbers paint a sobering picture. In some cities, nearly half of all Airbnb listings are managed by hosts with multiple properties, effectively treating Airbnb as a business instead of a casual side income. In areas with high tourist demand, locals find themselves priced out of their own neighborhoods, with rents rising faster than they can keep up. For the people who call these places home, Airbnb's growth often feels like a double-edged sword. Has this platform made travel better at the expense of making life harder for those who live in these cities? When Airbnb moves into a neighborhood, it changes more than just housing prices. It can alter the whole character of the community. In places like New Orleans, affordable neighborhoods are seeing a rise in short-term rentals, bringing in tourists but pushing out long-time locals. This gentrification often feels like the Disneyfication of these once authentic urban areas. These neighborhoods start to lose their cultural identity. Local shops that serve residents get replaced by tourist-focused businesses, and locals end up feeling like they're living in a commercialized version of their own community. Is this shift really helping local communities, or is it simply pushing them aside for the sake of tourism? In Barcelona, for example, residents have held protests arguing that Airbnb has turned their neighborhoods into theme parks for tourists. As locals are displaced, the neighborhood's unique character fades, leaving behind what some residents describe as a tourist bubble rather than a community. So, is the growth of Airbnb guests worth losing the history and culture of these once vibrant neighborhoods? As Airbnb grew, so did its legal battles. Cities worldwide began noticing Airbnb's impact on housing and started enforcing regulations to protect long-term residents. But Airbnb didn't back down. Instead, it invested millions in lobbying to push back against these new rules and defend its business model. New York and San Francisco became battlegrounds for these debates. Lawmakers there introduced regulations requiring Airbnb hosts to register their properties, limiting the number of nights per year that a property could be rented, and imposing hefty fines for non-compliance. In response, Airbnb pushed back hard, even going so far as to sue cities like New York and San Francisco to try to block these restrictions. How should a platform balance its growth and profits with the rights and needs of local communities? The line between business innovation and community impact has proven difficult to draw. Berlin also attempted to curb Airbnb by placing strict limits on short-term rentals, banning entire homes from being rented to tourists. The city's goal was clear: protect housing for Berlin's residents, but enforcing these rules has been an uphill battle. Airbnb promotes itself as a safe and reliable way for travelers to stay like a local, but the reality hasn't always lived up to that ideal. Numerous stories have emerged about hosts finding their homes trashed by guests or guests facing privacy violations. In one well-known case, a host named EJ returned from a trip to find her home destroyed, valuable belongings stolen, furniture ruined, and her personal sanctuary left in shambles. Can you imagine returning home to find the place you trusted with strangers completely destroyed? In responses to these safety concerns, Airbnb has introduced measures like a damage protection guarantee and a 24/7 customer support hotline. These efforts have often been more reactive than proactive, implemented only after incidents attract public attention. How secure can both hosts and guests feel knowing that Airbnb's safety measures might come too late? While the platform has taken steps to improve, it remains to be seen whether these will be enough to prevent future incidents. Airbnb's been under fire for issues of racial bias on its platform. Studies showed that guests of color often face discrimination from hosts, sometimes getting rejected or having their bookings canceled just because of their race. To tackle this, Airbnb launched an initiative called Project Lighthouse, aiming to uncover and address these biases and making the platform more inclusive. While Airbnb's leadership says they're committed to fixing this, a lot of people feel there's still a long way to go to create a space where everyone generally feels welcome. The question remains, can a platform truly enforce anti-discrimination policies when it relies so heavily on user autonomy? Despite attempts to address these issues, Airbnb's efforts to combat discrimination have had mixed results, with many arguing that the platform still has a long way to go to ensure equal treatment for all guests. Is the company doing enough, or are its policies merely a surface-level solution? Airbnb's impact reaches beyond just the individuals who host or stay with them. Its rise has disrupted the hotel industry and reshaped local economies. Meanwhile, Airbnb hosts often avoid these costly requirements, offering cheaper rates that attract budget-conscious travelers. But what does this mean for local businesses? In some cases, neighborhoods see a boost in tourism-driven businesses, while others suffer from a lack of stable customers as locals are displaced. Venice, Italy, for instance, has seen local shops replaced with souvenir stores and eateries catering solely to tourists. Are we seeing the rise of a global tourist monoculture driven by platforms like Airbnb? Airbnb's influence also has environmental and cultural impacts. High tourism cities, from Barcelona to Kyoto, are struggling to balance their local resources and infrastructure with the increased demand caused by Airbnb. In places that traditionally cater to residents, year-round tourist traffic puts additional strain on water, waste, and energy resources. In historic districts, Airbnb-driven tourism often leads to what some call cultural erosion. These areas, once home to authentic local life, start to feel more like a tourist attraction. In places like Lisbon, locals have protested, arguing that Airbnb is turning their communities into playgrounds for visitors, stripping away their neighborhoods' unique charm. Can these cities maintain their cultural integrity while catering to the demands of short-term rentals? Airbnb's journey from a desperate rent-saving idea to a global powerhouse has been impressive, but it's also raised complex questions. As more cities take action to curb Airbnb's influence, the platform faces a decision. Should it adapt to the needs of local communities or continue its relentless expansion? While Airbnb has made some attempts to address its negative impacts, like implementing safety guarantees and fighting discrimination, critics argue these are only the first steps. At its core, Airbnb's story is about more than travel. It's about the challenges of tech-driven disruption, the clash between innovation and community stability, and the ethical questions around who really benefits. Should Airbnb be more tightly regulated to protect housing and local culture, or is there room for it to evolve into a more community-friendly platform? Only time will tell if Airbnb's next chapter will bring positive change or more of the same. If you found this dive into Airbnb's impact insightful, be sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned for more explorations of the world's biggest companies and their unseen effects. What are your thoughts on Airbnb? Do you think it's time for stricter rules, or can Airbnb make changes from within? Let's talk in the comments.